Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
Right, forget anything else you had planned today because English cricket has just exploded in spectacular, chaotic, almost unbelievably dramatic fashion. And if you're not sitting down already, you might want to find yourself a chair because this one is absolutely wild from start to finish. Ben Stokes, England's most celebrated Test captain in a generation. The man who dragged this team out of the darkest chapter in its modern history and turned them into the most exciting side on the planet has been stood down from the second Test against New Zealand. His partner in crime, the brilliant pace bowler Gus Atkinson, is gone with him. Both men have been ruled out of the match at the Oval after being caught up in an incident at a London nightclub in the early hours of Monday morning. And as if that wasn't already enough of a bombshell to send the entire cricket world into a tailspin, the man they've called in to replace Stokes as captain isn't the vice-captain, isn't the next man in the natural order of succession. It's Joe Root, the greatest batter England have ever produced, the man they effectively retired from leadership 2 years ago, called back to clean up yet another mess, and now Rob Key, the director of cricket who has backed this group through thick and thin, through disaster and triumph, is standing at a crossroads and telling the world that he is seriously, genuinely considering banning alcohol from the England Test team entirely. No drinks, no celebrations, no nightcaps after a win, nothing, finished, done. This is English cricket's most embarrassing week in years, and today on Boundary Line UK, we are going through every single detail of it. Let's start at the beginning because it's important to understand how we arrived here. And the timeline of events makes for genuinely jaw-dropping reading. England were coming off the back of a first Test victory over New Zealand at Lord's. A good win, the kind of performance that reminds you why this team under Stokes has been so thrilling to watch. The dressing room had every right to celebrate. What followed, apparently, was a trip to a London nightclub that lasted well into the early hours of Monday morning and ended in an incident serious enough to prompt an internal investigation by the England and Wales Cricket Board. The full details of what happened have not been officially confirmed, but what has been confirmed is this. Both Stokes and Atkinson were involved. Both have been stood down from the second Test, and both men broke a midnight curfew that had only recently been put in place specifically to prevent exactly this kind of thing from happening. That last detail really cannot be glossed over. England introduced a midnight curfew during the winter following a series of alcohol-related controversies that dragged the team's reputation through the gutter. The management sat everyone down, had the difficult conversations, drew a very clear line in the sand and said, this is where it stops. And then, within months of that line being drawn, the captain himself walked straight through it in the early hours of a Monday morning in London. You genuinely could not make it up. Now, here is where it gets truly astonishing in terms of the scale of the problem. It is not just Stokes and Atkinson. 6 of the 11 players who started the first Test against New Zealand at Lord's have now been caught up in late-night alcohol-related incidents over the past 6 months. 6 out of 11. That is more than half the starting team. This is not a situation where you can point the finger at 1 or 2 bad actors and call it an isolated incident. This is a pattern. This is a culture. And it is a culture that Rob Key has now admitted may have been allowed to go unchallenged for far too long. Key, for all his brilliance as a communicator and his obvious love for this team, has always leaned heavily on the idea that you trust elite athletes to behave like elite athletes. He bought into the idea that Stokes and Brendan McCullum had created something different, something special, a group of men who would hold each other accountable because they believed in what they were building together. And for a long time, that worked. The results on the pitch were extraordinary. But now, with the evidence piling up that some players have been treating international cricket as a backdrop to a rather enthusiastic social life, Key is being forced into a very different conversation. Do we need to look at have we been strict enough? Key said. And if you read between the lines of that statement, what you're really hearing is a man who is quietly furious and quietly embarrassed in equal measure. Even when they win a game of cricket, is it now a time when there's just no alcohol at any time and at any stage? That is not a rhetorical question. That is a man genuinely weighing up whether the most radical possible solution is the right one. An outright alcohol ban on the England Test team would be an enormous seismic cultural shift. These are adults. They are among the best cricketers on the planet. And yet the conversation is now very seriously on the table about whether they can be trusted to drink responsibly as professional sports people. The fact that Key is saying it out loud is itself a story. And then Key said something even more striking. The players now have to show the public they can be trusted. At this point, it's hard to say they can. Read that again. The director of cricket, the most senior cricket official in England, is publicly saying that at this point in time, it is genuinely difficult to argue that the England Test team can be trusted by the public. If that doesn't send a shiver down your spine as an England supporter, you're not paying attention. The question of the captaincy is where things get genuinely complicated in a way that is as fascinating as it is uncomfortable. Under normal circumstances, when the captain is unavailable for a test match, the vice-captain steps in. The vice-captain is Harry Brook. Brook is a magnificent cricketer, arguably the most naturally gifted England batter of his generation. A man who hit the top of the Test batting rankings on the very same day this nightclub story broke, which is one of the great pieces of bad timing in the history of the sport. But Brook, for all his brilliance with a bat, is not the man they have turned to here. And there is a very specific, very uncomfortable reason for that. 8 months ago, Harry Brook was himself punched outside a nightclub in Wellington, New Zealand. He was the victim rather than the perpetrator, and that distinction matters enormously from a personal standpoint, but from a public relations standpoint, from a cricketing governance standpoint, from the perspective of an organisation desperately trying to restore its reputation. The optics of replacing one captain who was involved in a nightclub incident with another captain who was involved in a nightclub incident would have been absolutely catastrophic. England's management, to their credit, saw that immediately. They were not going to hand that open goal to the press. And so they went in a completely different direction. They went to Joe Root. Joe Root, aged 34, the man with more test runs than any Englishman who ever lived, the man they made captain in 2017 and relieved of the job in 2022 after what felt like years of being let down by the players around him. Root, who under Stokes and McCullum's Bazball revolution was freed from the captaincy burden and responded by batting with a freedom and a ferocity that made him look like the best batter on earth all over again. Root, who has watched from the pavilion steps in recent months as the team he used to lead has lurched from crisis to crisis off the pitch, and now they're calling him back, not to bat, not just to play, to lead. There is something almost Shakespearean about it. The old king called back to restore order when the new regime has descended into chaos. Except Root isn't old, he's still magnificent. And nobody who has watched him bat in the last 2 years would ever mistake him for a man in decline. But this is the thing about great players. They carry a weight that goes beyond statistics. They carry an authority that you cannot manufacture or manufacture quickly. When Root walks out to the middle at the Oval and takes his guard as England captain, even the most casual cricket fan in the country will understand what that moment means. It means England are trying to remind themselves of who they are supposed to be. How many times in recent years have we watched Root walk to the crease to bail England out? Close your eyes and you can picture it. 2 wickets down, almost no runs on the board, the dressing room in a state of quiet panic, and then Root appearing at the top of the pavilion steps, stretching his hamstrings at the boundary's edge before setting off at that familiar jogging trot towards the middle. It has happened so many times, it has almost become a comfort, almost become routine. And now, in a completely different context, in circumstances that none of us could have predicted even a week ago, England are reaching for Root again. Not because of a batting collapse this time, but because of a reputational one. The contrast in how this week has played out for the 2 Yorkshire batters at the heart of this story is stark and deeply ironic. Harry Brook, who has been diligently improving his game, who has responded to his own difficulties and controversies by keeping his head down and scoring enormous amounts of runs, climbed to number 1 in the Test batting rankings this week. On any other Monday, that would have been the story. That would have been the back page headline. Yorkshireman reaches the summit. England batter joins the elite. Instead, that story has been almost entirely swallowed by the chaos surrounding his captain and his county predecessor Root, who finds himself unexpectedly back in the hot seat. And what of Stokes himself? That is perhaps the most significant and delicate question of all. Rob Key was asked directly whether Stokes would remain as England Test captain going forward, and Key gave no assurances. None. He did not say Stokes was finished. He did not say Stokes would stay. He said he needed to think. He said he did not want to make a rash decision. But when you are the director of cricket and you cannot bring yourself to publicly back your captain in the middle of a crisis, that silence is deafening. It tells its own story. The relationship between Key and Stokes has been one of the most important in English cricket for the last 3 years, and right now it is under more pressure than it has ever been. Stokes, for his part, has not yet spoken publicly about what happened. The ECB investigation is ongoing. The details remain murky, but the silence from the man himself in an era when cricketers are expected to be communicators as much as they are expected to be athletes only adds to the unease. This is a man who has always worn his heart on his sleeve, who has never been afraid to speak his mind, who confronted the culture of English cricket head-on and dared it to change. The fact that he is now at the centre of the very controversy he was supposed to have banished feels painfully, uncomfortably ironic. Let's be absolutely clear about the historical context here, because it matters enormously. Before Stokes took over as captain and McCullum arrived as head coach, English Test cricket was in a state of genuine crisis. The team had just been whitewashed 5-0 in Australia. Players were miserable. There was a dressing room culture of fear and blame. Individuals were being sacrificed to protect the system rather than the other way around. Stokes and McCullum blew all of that up. They brought joy back. They brought courage back. They brought the idea that Test cricket could be played with freedom and ambition and a kind of joyful aggression that the sport had almost forgotten was possible. Bazball was not just a batting style. It was a philosophy. It was a statement about what cricket at its best could look like. And that philosophy came with a liberalism about lifestyle that was in part deliberate. The idea was that you treat people like adults, you trust them, you build a culture of accountability that comes from within rather than being imposed from without. Key, Stokes and McCullum all bought into that. And for a long time it worked brilliantly. The results were extraordinary. The atmosphere around the team was electric. Fans fell back in love with England Test cricket in a way they hadn't for years. But somewhere along the way, for some players, the freedom seems to have curdled into an entitlement. The trust seems to have been taken as a blank cheque rather than a responsibility. And now that blank cheque has bounced spectacularly and very publicly. At a nightclub in London in the early hours of a Monday morning, the specific detail of the midnight curfew being broken by the captain himself is frankly extraordinary when a set of rules exists and the person charged with enforcing those rules is the one who breaks them first and most visibly. You have a governance problem that goes beyond simple punishment. You have a question about authority, about credibility, about whether the rules themselves mean anything at all. Key knows this. That is why his language this week has been so careful, so measured, and so clearly designed to signal that something fundamental is about to change. Whether that change takes the form of an outright alcohol ban remains to be seen. Key himself seemed reluctant to commit, acknowledging that a blanket ban could feel punitive and could damage team morale if introduced clumsily. But the fact that he raised it, the fact that it is now part of the public conversation, tells you everything about the corner England have backed themselves into. When your best option for preventing your international cricketers from embarrassing the country is to treat them like they're in rehab, something has gone very seriously wrong. The second test at the Oval begins next week, and England go into it with Root as captain, without Stokes, without Atkinson, and with a cloud hanging over the dressing room that no amount of good batting or brilliant bowling is going to fully dispel. New Zealand, to their immense credit, have said nothing publicly. They are letting England self-destruct in peace, which is both very mature and probably quite tactically wise. If England are distracted and divided, New Zealand will happily take advantage on the pitch. Root, of course, will go about his business in the way Root always does, quietly, professionally, with an absolute iron focus on the cricket. He will prepare meticulously. He will lead with dignity. He will probably score 100 at some point, because that is what Joe Root does. And nothing, not captaincy, not controversy, not chaos around him, has ever truly disrupted his relationship with run scoring. But even Root's presence cannot fully paper over the cracks. This is a team with serious questions to answer about its culture, its discipline, and its future leadership. And those questions will not go away after 90 overs of Test cricket at the Oval. The broader picture for English cricket is deeply uncomfortable. This is a team that has achieved remarkable things in the last 3 years. Results-wise, they remain one of the most compelling and dangerous Test sides on the planet. But sport does not exist in a vacuum. The public invest emotionally in these teams. They buy tickets, they watch on television, they get up at 3 a.m. to stream matches from overseas. They do all of that because they care. And when the people they care about let them down, not on the pitch, but in nightclubs and on social media and in the early hours of Monday morning in London, the public's patience has limits. Key acknowledged that directly. He said the players need to show the public they can be trusted, and he admitted that right now that case is very hard to make. So where does this leave English cricket? It leaves it at a genuine crossroads. The Bazball era, for all its brilliance, is facing its most serious test, and crucially, the test is off the pitch rather than on it. The choices made in the next few weeks about leadership, about culture, about the consequences for those involved in these incidents will define what kind of Team England want to be for the next phase of their development. Do they double down on freedom and trust and hope the players respond? Or do they accept that freedom without accountability has been exploited and introduce a harder edge to the environment? Those are not easy questions, and there are no easy answers. What is clear is that the status quo cannot continue. 6 of the first Test she caught up in alcohol-related incidents in 6 months is not a coincidence. It is not bad luck. It is a pattern, and patterns in professional sport reflect culture, and culture comes from the top. If England want to remain one of the great Test sides of this era, they need to look in the mirror urgently and honestly and ask some very hard questions about what they are building, what they stand for, and who they want to lead them. Ben Stokes may still come back from this. He is too important, too gifted, too deeply embedded in what England have built to be discarded lightly. But he is not indispensable. No one is. And for the first time in 3 years, that conversation is genuinely, openly happening. Rob Key is thinking hard about difficult decisions. Joe Root is preparing to captain England again. Harry Brook is sitting on top of the world in batting terms while watching the captaincy pass over him for reasons that have nothing to do with cricket. And somewhere in all of that, the second test at the Oval is actually going to take place, which almost feels like a footnote at this point. But it isn't. It never is. Cricket always drags you back to the cricket eventually. And maybe, just maybe, what England need most right now is 90 overs in the field, a set of stumps at each end, and the familiar rhythm of the game to remind them why they all fell in love with this in the first place. Before the nightclubs, before the curfews, before the investigations and the statements and the press conferences full of careful, uncomfortable non-answers. Before all of it, just cricket. We will see if that is enough. If you made it this far, you are exactly the kind of person Boundary Line UK exists for. This channel is built for people who love cricket and want the real story, the full picture, no spin, no filter, just honest and passionate coverage of England and everything around them. If this video gave you something to think about, if it made you angry or frustrated or just deeply, deeply worried about where English cricket is heading, hit the like button and let us know. Drop your thoughts in the comments because there is a massive conversation to be had here. Should Stokes keep the captaincy? Should Key introduce an alcohol ban? Is Bazball finished as a cultural project, even if it lives on as a tactical one? We want to hear from you. And if you are not already subscribed to Boundary Line UK, now is the time. Because as long as English cricket keeps producing weeks like this one, we will not be short of things to talk about. Subscribe, like, comment, stay with us. This is Boundary Line UK, and we are just getting started.
Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.